Good morning from London, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining our Startup Genome webinar series this morning on the most relevant topic of attracting the best talent, attracting international resource, globally positioning your ecosystem. And let me briefly outline a bit our agenda for today. We will be looking, after a brief introduction, we will be looking at the importance of startup ecosystems for economic development in general terms, but obviously this situation where we are now as a great hope, as a great driver that hopefully will help us rebuild our economies after the COVID crisis. And I'll be digging into that a little bit. We want to explain to you the opportunities jointly with Startup Genome and our network to build an international brand, to attract the resources that hopefully will help you all in your ecosystems as you lead to develop your ecosystems, to attract international resources all over the globe. We want to showcase a bit the opportunities you have as members of our global network membership that is vast these days, for knowledge sharing, learning from peers that is so important in ecosystem development as it is for startups and for founders, peer-to-peer learning. And then I'm delighted to be joined today by Peter Paul from the Next Web TNW based in Amsterdam, as well as Jaigeun Lim from our member in Seoul, South Korea, one of our long-standing clients, and we'll get a good perspective from Seoul and somebody who's actually working with us on a very practical basis. Want to leave it open to the end of the discussion of the webinar for questions and answers, and let's jump right in. Just a sec, please. Apologies, our slideshow is slightly stuck. Apologies, for some reason slides don't move. Give me 1 sec, please. All right, without further ado, now we should be good. Here we are. Apologies. Yeah, introduction purpose. Our Startup Genome webinar series is quite new. We actually kicked it off this week. And we thought about highlighting very specific, tangible topics that are relevant for ecosystem leaders, for ecosystem development on a day-to-day basis. Today, we're looking at the branding factors that help sustainably grow your ecosystem. We want to explain to you how Startup Genome, but also our much esteemed partners such as TNW today on the call is one of the most esteemed examples, can help, can assist, are available for contacts for discussions. And we obviously, as we start this webinar series, we want and would love your feedback. So tell us what we can do better, what you would like to hear more of. And my colleague Adam here on the call, you can see his email address. Please do contact him anytime. We'd love to get your feedback, candid, open, critical, whatever it is. Previous topics that we've covered, funding policy, supporting startups and scale-ups, so that mostly the government reaction to preserving our economic structures, our startup ecosystem structures during and post the COVID-19 series. I can wholeheartedly recommend the recording of the funding policy seminar if you're interested in it. It is hugely relevant, particularly as we also looked at post-COVID, not only at the height of the crisis, but also what's coming next. Future topics, let us know what's of interest to you. We got many in our pockets and in our funnel, but we obviously would like to pick those that for you as practitioners are the right ones and that you really would be interested. Again, Adam is the one to contact, or please let me know myself. That would be hugely appreciated. Okay, today, Peter Paul from the Next Web in Amsterdam and Jaigeun Lim, Deputy Director of Economic Policy Division, are joining me. I'm delighted. Thank you so much for being with us today. We will guide you through the next 45 to 50 minutes or so. All right, yeah, why is startup ecosystem development so incredibly important? Let's spend just 2 minutes on the relevance of our economic sector. The startup ecosystem for us in our calculations accounts for 2.8 trillion of economic value, GDP. And that equals the GDP of a G7 economy. Just keep that in mind. Our segment has grown to a very considerable amount of the global economy. My home, the United Kingdom, we calculate that about 10% of our GDP is related to the startup economy, and employment to 9 up to 10%. So it has not become, it is not a niche anymore. It has become a very major economic factor. There's no doubt about it, which is an important message for us as ecosystem developers and leaders in our ecosystems. It is also a very important message for the politicians we are working with for policymakers, because obviously that tells us how important the sector is and how much attention we ought to pay to it. The global startup revolution is driving the most dramatic value creation in history. Just take an example, the 5 most valued companies in the Fortune 500 list, within the top 10 of the Fortune 500, are actually tech startups. There's an Amazon, Google, Facebook, Alibaba, Tencent, 5 of the top 10 companies. That's unheard of. We are not even counting Microsoft or Apple. They came much earlier. We consider them more as tech, more as establishment today, established companies. Count them in, you got 7 out of 10 that are resulting from the startup revolution. Never in history have we had such a concentration of top companies from one segment. Look at it, automotive, 3 in their heyday, nowhere today, or even telecoms and computers, meaning hardware, chips, etc. They never made it to more than 3 amongst the top 10 companies in the Fortune 500 list. Just to illustrate what has happened here, the value creation through the startup, kicked off through the startup ecosystem development. And obviously we'd be happy to see many more of our companies making these listings. Similarly important, and I'm glad that we get the data that we can show here. They've been developed by a colleague of mine, our Chief Innovation Officer, Nobio Morelix, who then worked at Kaufman Foundation in the States, where he had a look, did extensive research in the US, admittedly, on net job creation by firm age. And what we can absolutely say here is that startups, fast growth, small companies with fast growth, startup companies, are the only net creators of jobs, of high quality employment, and of considerable amounts of employment. That's the red bar here, firm age 0 to 5 years. Look at all the others as they go through economic crisis after the first internet bubble burst, 2002, 3, the big financial crisis, 8, 9, 10. These more established, more traditional companies have been job destroyers in a sense, as they strive for productivity increases. They're not hiring at scale. They're rather looking at using technology to drive down employment and drive up productivity, which makes absolute sense for them. But economically speaking, and from a policymaker's point of view, they are obviously not the job creators. Our segment is, and that's all the importance and possibly all there is to say to it. So let's keep that in mind in our dialogue. These are very upbeat messages. The not so upbeat message is that to this very day, the concentration of startup ecosystems, the value creation is still incredibly concentrated. Look at the world here. We are plotting out the top 100 cities on this graph against ecosystem value created. And to this day, Silicon Valley leads by a mile, followed by New York, London, Beijing, Boston, Tel Aviv. So the top 10, the top 20 cities in the startup ecosystem, the top 5 cities in the startup ecosystem worldwide are concentrating to this very day an enormous amount of wealth, leaving the others behind. And for us, the Startup Genome, we started on this mission for about 10 years ago. For us, the idea really is to break up the monopoly, if you will, of these big cities and to make accessible the startup ecosystem revolution to as many places in the world as possible. That's critically important for us. Learning from each other, peer experiences, sharing the knowledge, how to develop a successful startup ecosystem. That's what we are all about. And that's what we've been striving for since the very day the company was founded. Success of your startup should never depend on where you are, not your region, not your gender, ethnicity, or social background. The startup revolution should be open to anybody who has got ideas and the will to create something unique, something special. And we aim to spread the genome, that's why we are called Startup Genome, of thriving startup ecosystems everywhere. And I'm so glad to be joined today by Jaigeun Lim from Seoul. We can welcome the city of Seoul. The municipality of Seoul is one of the top 20 ecosystems for the first time in our global ranking. So congratulations, an enormous, fantastic achievement. And I'm very confident, knowing the policies you are enacting, that this trend is going to further continue on a very upward trajectory. So that's really great to have you. And it demonstrates that something can be done if learning, if knowledge is being shared, if the right measures and policies are being put in place. This monopoly of the big three, the big five, can be broken up. Seoul is just a fantastic example demonstrating that. Who we are entrepreneurs, ecosystem builders, more so than consultants. We're coming from a very entrepreneurial background. Our founder has founded in total 5 companies, 3 of them successful, very successful, 2 of them miserable failures. So we've really learned our lessons here. What it means to be an entrepreneur, but also what the circumstances need to be, you know, for founders, for entrepreneurs to thrive. The legislative, regulatory frameworks, access to talent, access to finance, whatever it is. That's us, where we are coming from, founded 10 years ago, jointly with Steve Blank at Stanford University. We started, and to this very day, our work is based on rigorous research. We've got 100 clients over the last 3 years we've been advising. We've been learning about the effective and the ineffective policies. You typically learn more from the things that don't work and then analyze where's the flaw and try to draw the right conclusions. And we are continuing to do assessments across today 75 cities, 35 countries. So a vast pool of knowledge that is coming out of our research, data, and qualitative. We've started a global movement that we are very proud of. We are working not directly with founders all the time, but through what we call startup support organizations, incubators, accelerators, all these great organizations around the world that are supporting our founders in their quest of becoming successful entrepreneurs. 300 plus are totally are today in our network, and they give us this enormous leverage. They allow us to connect with more than 90,000 startup leaders, founders all over the world, and get their perspectives in, and that's so important for us. We augment our work by adding expertise from world-renowned experts. Good example, funding policy. We work with Josh Lerner at the Harvard Business School, with the Global Entrepreneurship Network, Angel Resource Institute, and the practitioners at the very successful ecosystem in London, TechNation UK. Just to give you an example, so bringing in always the expertise, the specialist expertise, and that's why we got Peter Paul here from TNW as a highly acclaimed specialist for the issue of branding and positioning your ecosystem within the global ecosystem network. Yeah, startup as growth drivers. I've been highlighting all the successes and the importance, but obviously we are in unprecedented and uncharted waters. Our startups have been affected disproportionately from the COVID-19 crisis. We did analysis starting in China, which was leading the crisis, if you will, by about 6 to 8 weeks, and we saw this incredible decline in, particularly in funding. Series A dropped off a cliff. And the runway of startups, first in China and then all over the world a few weeks later, startups having a runway of on average 3 months, 8 weeks, 3 months, some lucky ones of 6 months. Obviously, that's hugely concerning, and we've all witnessed startups going out of business, startups shedding jobs as they had to grapple with access to funding. So that's a documented fact. We've been lobbying all over the world for policymakers to support the ecosystem as they have done with traditional industries. Our message was always, yeah, save your airline industry, but don't forget the startup ecosystem, because it's the engine of high quality job creation. We strongly believe the startup ecosystem environment, the startups are the growth drivers that will help us rebuild our economies and get us out of the dip that we are seeing due to COVID. And we are not just saying that because we are hopeful, indeed we are, but secondly, and more importantly, because we've seen the incredible recovery after the financial crisis 2008-09 that was largely led by startups founded in the middle of the crisis. London is a great example. I firsthand witnessed what happened to the traditional banking industry with the rise of fintech, and all of a sudden we got a third component for this great city to build its economic value, and startups have been critically important to do that. And we believe that many politicians the world over have understood that importance and are willing to support us, support you going forward. Having said that, it's always difficult for a startup ecosystem to stand out domestically in dialogue with politicians. They talk about large industries, supporting those, but also internationally to distinguish yourself as an ecosystem that's relevant, that's interesting for foreign investment, that's interesting for the top talent you may wish to attract, and to create the awareness and drive the resource attraction ultimately that you may wish to see, to bring in global knowledge to your environment, to your city, to your region. That's what we want to address today. Why is it is a clear brand proposition, awareness about your ecosystem so important? Well, if you look at our life cycle model, activation, globalization, attraction, integration, all these different phases, ecosystems like human beings or like living beings in their development go through as they grow up and mature, one thing always stands out. It is always about resource attraction, about connectedness with the world that helps move successfully and rapidly from one of these phases to the next. As a very young ecosystem activation phase here on our slide, I want to leverage, I want to bring in people who bring global startup knowledge, business model knowledge, technology knowledge. As I globalize, I most likely will not have the talent available to completely staff all the companies that get created. Again, I need to bring in software engineers and growth talent into my ecosystem, and so forth and so forth. The things really exacerbate, and the importance of being on the map again cannot be underestimated or cannot be underscored enough from my perspective. Awareness, energize you on. Well, awareness possibly comes from two perspectives. And first of all, let's have a domestic view. So if you don't have a vibrant community that talks about startup ecosystems as a vibrant economic sector, as an important economic sector, it's something that really makes sense. You will not be able to develop the entrepreneurial culture and the attractiveness that's so critical to continually bring in new people. If being a startup entrepreneur is not talked about, then young students, graduates, the talent will quite possibly not elect to become an entrepreneur, and you will have lost an opportunity. So creating this vibrancy within the economy, within the community, is so important. So awareness about the startup revolution, about what can be achieved domestically within your ecosystem, is hugely relevant for the purpose of attracting as many people as possible. On the same token, looking beyond your ecosystem, creating interest on a national, a regional, European, an Asian perspective, on a global level, that's important in order to attract these resources, but also the knowledge you want to bring to your city. It's a long-term game of developing a clear, distinct brand proposition, as it is for any company, for any product. Distinct brand propositions don't just magically appear. They are the result of very concentrated, long-term and very sustained work to really have a concise ecosystem brand. Resource attraction should allow you to get enough founders activated. I was talking about that, but also to attract the talent, the investors, and also the corporate players, the more traditional corporate players that may wish to join the ecosystem in order to drive open innovation concepts, drive their own digital transformation activities, etc. From our perspective, and particularly for the smaller ecosystems, not for the Silicon Valleys, the Londons and the New Yorks and the Beijings in the world, we believe that specialization is key. You need a distinct story as you're smaller and you're competing with these large giants in a sense. And we really would like to encourage you to think hard about what makes your ecosystem so unique. Is it a subsector specialization? Great example is one of our clients, the city of Frankfurt. And Frankfurt is, forgive me Frankfurters if you're on the call, but is not renowned as the startup center in the world. But it has managed to develop a highly relevant brand proposition for fintech based on its traditional strengths in banking. It is host to the European Central Bank, and it has very cleverly and on a very sustained basis over the last 5-6 years developed its reputation as one of the most innovative and one of the leading fintech clusters in the world. That's a very distinct brand proposition. It's a great example how to illustrate what can be achieved, even if you're not one of the largest ecosystems everybody's talking about because they are producing 20 unicorns per year. What we certainly also do see is a shift in the sectors and the technologies that are being used. We are undoubtedly moving towards deep tech, the integration of software and hardware, AI, cyber, etc. And from our perspective, this makes intellectual property and industry expertise relevant for the future development of interesting startups. And having the city of Seoul here in South Korea as the leader in technology patents, R&D, nobody in the world is patenting more innovative technologies as Seoul does in the world. It's incredible. That is a very, very sound foundation. The question is then, what do you do around that? How many startups can you attract? Can you take these patents? Can you take this research into the world? It's what Seoul is striving to do, and do it quickly. And the startup, we've all learned that the startup economy, startups are a great way to do so. But positioning, and I believe Seoul and Jaigeun will talk about it, is a great example to position itself around deep tech, building on the strong foundation of intense research, academic prowess, in high technology. So that's a very clear brand position that one can build. Again, word of warning, we are all not Silicon Valley, so we can't play in every dimension, and we shouldn't. We really should look at specialization, and we should tell these stories to the world in order to, like Frankfurt did, in order to make it very clear. Come to Frankfurt if you're interested in the European fintech. It's a good place to be. Don't come if you're in e-commerce or if you are in edtech or agtech. It's not the place to go. So that's a very clear proposition. What strengths do you bring to the table? Really think about it. Try to develop this distinct brand proposition. I've said it 5 times, but I'm doing it for a purpose. I cannot reiterate the importance of doing so. Subsectors, the examples I brought to you today. Policies, regulatory environments are hugely interesting, and you can build a proposition around a regulatory environment. That is possible. Great programs, great incentives. They all form a really comprehensive narrative. So telling the story, that's the important bit we want to get to. And telling the story, here you can see a listing on this slide of all the products we bring to our clients, from ecosystem branding to strategy development and so forth. We obviously today want to focus on the notion of branding. How do we attract international resource, drive global awareness to your ecosystem, but also, and that's not on the slide, create a sense of community and a sense of vibrancy locally. Yeah. The foundation of branding from our perspective is the GSER. Today it's the GSER 2020. GSER, that's the Global Startup Ecosystem Report. We provide every year that to this day ranks about 140 ecosystems, studying 250 in total. So we don't rank everybody, but we are studying more than 250 ecosystems annually to understand what's happening in the world. We've recently added in-depth coverage of sub-Saharan Africa and actually the Maghreb countries and South America, Latin America, in order to better encapsulate what's happening in these developing regions, and added that to our coverage. We are working incredibly hard on driving more traffic to your ecosystem pages, using the GSER as a portal where people come in and they look, corporate leaders, talent, investors, they look for interesting places in the world, and the GSER and its website equivalent are a great inroad to your ecosystem, because they provide the overview of the world, and they guide people to the most relevant places. We've done a lot of work on increasing readership tracking, so we know who's coming. We can help our members to understand who is looking at the ecosystem. Is it talent? Is it investors? Is it founders? Who is interested in the ecosystem? And we provide this information on a very regular basis. GSER is a lot of research. It is a lot of ranking, organic content. It is also a portal to the individual cities and clusters. Here again, we have the example of Seoul, ranked number 20, so congratulations. With its subsector strengths and examples that we seek to highlight. We try to tell a story here in very, very short, a very brief story about why should you invest in Seoul? What is happening? What are the factors that make Seoul so interesting, or any other city, but what we see is the example of Seoul. And also, why should you move your startup to Seoul? So really applying to founders, to talent. Why should I come to this great city? What makes it? What should I expect if I go there? So for us, we call it a deep dive. It's a showcase of all our member network clients or community members. That's the better word to use. And the GSER, as having said, is the bedrock, because it creates this vibe, it creates this excitement, it creates an enormous amount of traffic and interest in any ecosystem that is participating. We go a step further. We launched the GSER on an annual basis. We invite all our members to come in normal times to join us physically for 1 or 2 or 3 days. Last year, we were with TNW and Peter Paul in Amsterdam, and all our members, we had fantastic discussions on the main stage of this great event, and many breakout sessions and policy discussions and so forth. It really shone a spotlight on GSER, but also the member cities that participated. This day, we had to rejig, obviously, a bit. We had a fantastic, what we call ecosystem couch conference about 2 weeks ago. I hope many of you on this call today participated, where we had very intense discussions with policymakers, with representatives of the startup ecosystem, very much like what we saw in the physical events. And with the help of TNW, we were really able to shift the conversation to an online format. But it's the same thing at the end, and we are quite proud, all of us, that we achieved the same sense of engagement, of sharing, and of excitement. So these are parts of the branding, because you, our members, are present at these events, and it is noted that a city, that a cluster, is participating and taking to the stage and telling their story in these settings. Here you can see all the participants. 1,500 top leaders participated in the last conference, in an online event, hand-selected top leaders in the world that are relevant to our ecosystems. And here's just a selection of the speakers. Just look at the names. So it's certainly something that really stands out. We don't want to rest on the laurels of launching a report successfully once a year. We want to have a more continuous media, PR, and brand play. And for us, the first steps in this direction will be looking at distinct subsectors. So throughout the year, expect us to launch a whole series of in-depth reports similar to the GSER, but focused on distinct sectors: life sciences, AI, blockchain, cybersec, edtech, all the interesting sectors that are so relevant as of now. We want to really shine a spotlight on them, analyze what's happening, and analyze also where in the world this is happening. And again, if your city, if your municipality, if your environment is part or strong in one of these subsectors, please participate. Please make yourself heard, so that everybody notices what is happening here. We don't want to only publish. We also want you to engage and to support your positioning as a city, as a region, as a country. But we don't want to let you alone. We want to help you with very practical communication materials, media preparations on a group call. We help you tell the story. We got ideas how to best position your story and all our members' stories with the international press for PR work, coaching on interviews, media to showcase your ecosystem. We've pulled together entire and quite comprehensive packs with press releases, emails, reports, etc., that you can directly share with media outlets, which always makes for much more mentions. Develop templates that you can customize very quickly and without much effort on your end for newsletters, social media, etc., in order to play multi-channel. We are adding podcasts, radio and television to the media pitch list in order to make sure we got as comprehensive a channel coverage as humanly possible. And we are continuing to explore distribution partnerships, really make this message heard. Coming back to our purpose, we want to showcase as many cities, as many regions in the world as possible in order to help them develop. So that's the quest for us in 2020 and 2021. Practically, branding membership and global membership with Startup Genome go hand in hand. Branding membership allows you to be part of the GSER, to be showcased, like the example I showed for Seoul. It is a platform, it's the inroad, a window, I should say, to your ecosystem. So use it, and please keep in mind, this is not limited to a once a year event, the launch of the Global Startup Ecosystem Report. We are adding these pages all the time. When a new member joins our Global Startup Ecosystem Network, the deep dives can be added, and this window can be added to your particular location. And with the global member network, obviously, we want you, and as many new members as possible to engage in policy dialogue in this sharing of expertise and knowledge. Come together virtually, physically throughout the year. You can see it here. We are currently under COVID circumstances hosting virtual monthly meetings. And we are hopefully soon going back to annual in-person member meetings where we can really debate, where we can share good policies, can share our insights, learning from global experts that we bring to the table, your peers, talking about policy successes, and that's most importantly, being in a network with friends behind closed doors where you can openly share failures and debate failures and get input on those. Because in the end, where do we as humans learn most from? It is the failures. It's not the successes celebrated. It's what we got wrong. And when we discuss it with our peers, we get the biggest learnings out of these failures. That's what we want to do with this network of friends, of peers, as ecosystem leaders. Give you an example what I'm talking about here. This is the current ecosystem member list of Startup Genome, and I think you can see for yourself it's a truly impressive global coverage. We are working diligently on adding many more, particularly in Africa and Latin America, but we are very proud of what we've achieved already. The dialogue in this peer exchange is really powerful when you think about it. Yeah, peer connections, I addressed that already. With that introduction, quite a lengthy one, but I hope it gave you a good perspective over the importance of branding, of a succinct brand proposition, and of bringing this succinct brand proposition to the world. I would like to hand over to one of our esteemed partners and experts that I was mentioning so many times. That's Peter Paul from The Next Web. Peter Paul, floor is yours. You're muted for the moment. You need Peter Paul, please.
Of course, it's nice to unmute. Let's go again. Thank you, Stephan. It's really great to be here. And everybody in the call, thank you for taking the time today to share some of our experiences with you and to learn together. Really delighted to be here with Startup Genome, a very important partner to us in the global tech ecosystem. And really, like, we're building up on each other's strengths, their insights in the ecosystem, and our way to translate that to the global audience is really augmenting each other and really valuable to me. If you look at the next slides, you'll see a short introduction, and Stephan is going to be pointing for me, and it's moving on. That we have developed a specific series of services for cities and regions. And looking at the next slide, you see where we are coming from. And we come from a background of media and events in the tech industry globally. So for the first 10 years of its existence, TNW was all about writing about the global tech ecosystem, opinionated articles reaching millions of people around the world, and organizing live events in Amsterdam originally, but then also around the world. And we started to get more and more demand, if you look at the next slides, from ecosystems around the world, like, how can you help us? How can you help us bring our story to the world? And we started developing a number of services based basically on client demand. And now we are like mastering these kind of activities and wrapping them up as products to be able to bring them to more ecosystems, because we fully agree with what Stephan was saying before. It is super important that we spread the knowledge about ecosystems, that we showcase like what's happening in cities around the world, and that we don't just look at Silicon Valley when we talk about the startup ecosystem. So we have developed marketing services, innovation programs, soft landing programs, where we really attract talent and attract companies to your region. We have developed a number of digital events also because of the COVID crisis, but really serving a goal also to reach a more global audience. And we even have helped set up tech hubs in cities to attract the talent. And if on the next slide, you'll see a few of the cities where we've worked with the most over the last years, where we're really proud. The city of Amsterdam, we're based there ourselves, but we do a lot with the local government to attract talent and to attract companies to Amsterdam. Amsterdam is now the third ranked startup ecosystem in the global startup report by Startup Genome. So we're very proud about that. It's the third in Europe, that is, number 12 in the world, if I get it right. And we also work with Germany, with Barcelona, with cities around the world. And I'll talk to you about 2 of these cases in the next few minutes, because that really brings it to life. And the first one is really on the next page. It's with South Korea and Seoul. It's one of the cases that I'm super proud about and happy that we have had the opportunity to be part of that journey. Because I think South Korea, as Stephan was saying before, they are really actively building an ecosystem, wanting to compete with the global leaders. And it doesn't just come to you, but you have to really invest in it and really work hard to make this happen. And that's what they've been doing for many years already. And now steadily moving up in those rankings and bringing that success into South Korea. And we've been lucky to support a few years the K Startup Grand Challenge, which is an amazing program where they invite technology companies from all over the world to do a soft landing in Seoul and really get connected with the local ecosystem and get an entry basically in Asia. And that's a very smart positioning. Come to Seoul and we'll help you to get into Asia. But we will also help you connect with global leading tech companies like Hyundai, like Samsung, like LG. So there's a really compelling story there. So they shape the story and we help them attract tech companies from mainly the European region in this case. And then last year we also helped with a media series to really showcase the current strength of the Seoul ecosystem. And we had the deputy mayor in front of our camera and showcased him to the global audience. And we went to a few of the tech hubs in the city to show what's happening there, because people around the world, they want to know, like, what's going on? What are the opportunities for me? And just this year, currently running, we're doing a media campaign together with Financial Times, our mother company that took a majority stake in TNW about a year ago. And together with Financial Times and TNW, we are now basically celebrating the success of the Seoul ecosystem. So really bringing this to life and make sure that it really becomes a magnet to other tech companies and tech talent to also want to come to Seoul. So that's one of the cases that I'm really proud about, and we'll hear more about Seoul in the next talk. So I'll leave it at that. But it's a really great story. And then a bit triggered by the COVID crisis, we've been having to pivot because we were doing a lot of media, we were doing physical events, but physical events are difficult now. And we developed also, again, based with clients, they said we really still want our startups to be able to meet investors from around the world. How do we do it? And we created a format, it's called Hangout with VCs. And it's basically an online event where we invite global investors to meet with local startups. And if you look at the next slide, you see how we are doing that currently. Oh, we are missing one slide, that's no problem. Maybe go back up. We're doing that together with Germany, and we are having the German startups just in this month meet with global investors in online matchmaking sessions and making that happen, but also productizing that more to bring that to the global audience. So those are different ways how we can use our media strength and our events production strength. Like Stephan was just before also showing the couch conferences that we have done together with Startup Genome to really connect the global tech ecosystem players. We can also use that to connect the local economy with global investors or with global talent, if you will, because we also have talent attraction formats in events and media. Yeah, if you look at the next slide, we see that on October 1st and 2nd, we were planning to have our physical event in Amsterdam, 20,000 people coming to Amsterdam to really meet and connect. Many of the Startup Genome members were there last year as well. We had the launch of the Global Startup Ecosystem Report at the event. This year it will not be a physical event, but we'll make it a fully digital event, basically allowing us to reach an even bigger audience. So we really want to offer the opportunity to all ecosystems around the world, bring your startups. We will have virtual booths. They can showcase themselves to a global audience, not to the 20,000 people that will be there in the physical event, but to 100,000 people or more that will come to our digital event. So I think this is really a nice opportunity. I really want to invite ecosystems around the world, like still keep coming to events, because it's a great way for your best startups and scale-ups to meet the global community. And October 1st and 2nd, we'll be working again with Startup Genome to also do some other programming. Coming to the end of the time that I think I have one more slide. Basically, yeah, thanking you all for having the time at this moment. And maybe concluding, I gave you 2 cases now, working with Germany, working with Seoul and South Korea. But typically what we do is we really, and often together with Startup Genome, we really assess the current state of the ecosystem and your key objectives. And then we start building something together. We don't just do the same trick to every ecosystem, because if you want to be known as a green tech hub around the world, we probably want to do different interventions than if you want to be a fintech hub. It just calls for different branding, different attraction models, and also like just where you are in the world probably makes a lot of difference in the way you want to showcase yourself to other ecosystems. So that's where we love to go creative and build something custom-made with our ecosystem partners. Thanks for now, and we'll be around if there's questions at the end.
Peter Paul, thanks so much for what I found most inspiring words, but also very practical advice. Thanks. We really, as members of our network, can practically take away and really start working with you on developing these distinct brand propositions and making ourselves heard in the world. What I found hugely inspiring in all the misery of this economic crisis was a debate, a discussion with founders and investors in parts of the world that are not so connected. They are not so large. They are typically in economically challenged environments. Take an example in Brazil. If you hadn't been in Sao Paulo for many years, you were not really, as a founder, on the radar of investors. You were not really part of the fabric of what was happening. Today, the world has changed, and we are so glad that you have changed, that you have helped us become more virtual, because it allows us to include so many more voices. And the Brazilian example, what we heard, was so inspiring, where all of a sudden founders from the rural regions are basically on a level playing field. They don't have to sit for a coffee in Sao Paulo in a workspace. They are on a level playing field, at least in theory, because they can connect in the same way. And you have helped us do the same with our members and our communities all around the world. So to your point, we are very much looking forward to October, and we are hoping that so many more people will join us as they could in the past. Because we don't have to travel, we can really all participate online. For us, as a positive, upbeat message out of all the misery of this crisis, it is a bit of a leveler. It makes access to knowledge, access to these conferences, etc., so much more available to so many more people. So that's the positive takeaway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, big thank you for helping us staying online, so to speak.
Connected, global connectedness.
Indeed. Jaigeun, it's a great pleasure and honor to have you here from the municipality of Seoul. We've been working for two and a half years very intensely together. But maybe before we start about the topic overall, but maybe just give us for 1 or 2 minutes a wrap up of this great story of Seoul, today number 20 in the world. What has happened? What have you been doing? How does it look in Seoul these days?
Yeah. As you may know, we have been very impressed by the top 20 ranking in the global startup ecosystem. So as you may know, from 2018, so I established a new economic plan for the startup ecosystem. So we adopted the 7 fast track projects to enhance our startup ecosystem to the global top five level. So anyway, this year we got the good results from the global research on the startup ecosystem. So we are very happy now.
And that's more than well deserved. And Jaigeun, the impact of telling your story, telling what you've been doing to the world. Can you give us a few examples? I know that you've been working diligently on connecting to the global startup ecosystem world and this knowledge. You're very keen on attracting founders from abroad. How much does the storytelling to the world really matter to you? What are you doing?
Yeah, as a capital city, Seoul has been playing the important role in South Korea's economy, as well as other sectors for the past decades. Not only in the service industries, but also in the manufacturing sectors, Seoul is a leading city in every corner of businesses in South Korea. Conventionally, Seoul is known to the world for global conglomerates such as Samsung, Hyundai, but now we are noticing that our startup ecosystem is in the middle of the global spotlight. During my working experience for startup policy over the last 4 years, I've always had a confidence on our startup ecosystem and our good talents. Therefore, I have been keen to find ways of exposing our ecosystem, which might be unestimated and less known to the world. When the startup genome is reaching out to me for establishing our partnerships, I was sure that startup genome would be the best partner for Seoul to expose our ecosystem to many global partners and global markets. Through this partnership with the startup genome, we were able to get the objective assessments from external perspective on our ecosystem and our policy. For the past 2 years, we have several conference calls, virtual sessions, and in-person meetings, and discussed lots of topics in terms of the startup ecosystem. In this process, Startup Genome gave many feedbacks on overall startup ecosystem, and it helped us enhance our policies. We are very satisfied with the path we've come with the Startup Genome. Thank you. Yeah.
Jaigeun, thank you so much for very, very positive words. Really appreciate it. You made one important point with the work of the assessment, the research we do, the objective research. Storytelling becomes a bit different. It is not marketing from the client's perspective. You are not telling the Seoul story alone. You're basing it on objective data, neutral data. We are neutral assessment. We don't rank somebody high because they are friends as much as we would love to, because they deserve it based on the clear and transparent data that we put together. So I'm just wondering, did you get any feedback? Has it helped you to be part of this very objective ranking and renowned ranking? When you think about founders being more inclined from abroad, more inclined to come to Seoul, VCs looking at Seoul maybe with different eyes and broader eyes, or have you seen any change there as yet?
This year's report has been spread out in diverse the domestic media as well as the central government level. So as I can notice that most of media covered two main issues in common. First one is the ranking itself, is obviously, and second, the ecosystem value of Seoul, which was estimated at $39 billion US. So it means that those results can could attract much more VC and then the accelerators from other countries, such as the plug and play tech center. Or maybe they will open new the Seoul chapter this September. Well, I think due to the thanks to the this year's the rankings, maybe we can enhance our business environment. Yeah.
I'm pretty confident, and I'm keeping our fingers crossed, but I'm pretty confident that this top 20 ranking and being part of it will open the eyes of many foreign investors as well, and foreign talent. Yes.
And I'd like to add another opinion about this report. In my point of view, what makes the report special is the point that it's a city-based analysis. I think that the city-based analysis of a startup ecosystem might be more useful to recognize the better performers in the global level than in the country levels its analysis. In this report, we could easily compare other cities with Seoul and find the best practice and learn from those good cases. Every local player and expert in Seoul said that being ranked in top 20 is very impressive. However, given that South Korea took a 10th place in terms of GDP last year, but we will still have a long way to go regarding startup ecosystem. So as a tool of vitalizing our ecosystem, so we'll host lots of international events in terms of startup ecosystem, such as Tech Project 2020, Try Everything. But due to the COVID-19, it will be very difficult for us to handle on these events, but we will go on. Yeah. And
Jaigeun, we can't wait to join you in September at Tech Rise. So
yeah, and then when it comes to global perspective, so we got a chance to speak at TNW's Ecosystem Culture Conference last month. Yeah. And then my deputy mayor for economy at this event expressed his impression and saw the remarkable rise in the rankings, and then his opinion and his policy vision to enhance our ecosystem to the global leaders. I'm sure that participating in global networks and events will help us stamp Seoul's ecosystem on the minds of global partners like you. Yeah.
Jaigeun, thank you so much for joining us this morning, for sharing the incredible story. Again, a big congratulations to where you are. But knowing your ambition, we expect even more to come very soon. We are also incredibly impressed about the long-term sustained thinking. I think this is really a 5+ years, a 10 years plan. And I think you formulated the ambition, or if I heard you correctly, 10th economy in the world. I guess that tells you a long story where you want to see your startup ecosystem being positioned going forward as well. We keep all fingers crossed and keep telling the story so that as many people as possible can hear it, particularly the story around, I mentioned it, the incredible research capability that already sits in South Korea, that sits in Seoul, R&D facilities and academic prowess. I think many more people still need to hear in the world what is really happening in here and how the startup ecosystem is increasingly engaging. Big thank you for joining us. I'm getting a few questions here, and one I would actually first like to address to you, Jaigeun. And the one is, in how far has the storytelling about the startup ecosystem, the ranking and so forth, the media activation, not only helped you see people abroad, address people abroad, but build the sense of community in Seoul? Do you see more people being aware of what's happening, more students at least considering a career in entrepreneurship? Does that help?
Just after the rankings announcements, in South Korea, the many medias, the newspapers and the online news medias, they collected the result of this research, and then they interpreted the meaning of the results, and then you gave the lots of the items analyzed. So as many newspapers, they are handling on the importance of the global rankings in terms of the startup ecosystem. Particularly the other cities, for example, Daejeon or Busan and the Gangwon province, Gyeonggi province, they are getting to have a big interest in the global research on the startup ecosystem.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Jaigeun. Maybe Peter Paul, from your perspective as well, we've been talking a lot about positioning the ecosystem globally, attracting people from abroad. But from what you've been doing, maybe you also have a view on how important really is it to create a vibrant local community. We call it local connectedness, So not speaking to the people in Silicon Valley, but having the, first of all, this vibrant community at home where people share ideas and really are inclined to be part of the entrepreneurship movement. Yes. Yeah.
Again.
Now we got you. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. So that's a great question. I think indeed the local ecosystem, getting them connected, getting them also to know each other and to inspire each other is super important. And we've seen we have a couple of tech spaces, so physical buildings where we curate really great tech companies to come together and to grow together. And you see an enormous impact in those kind of buildings where if you really do curation at the porch, so don't just let any like new company in, but really fast growing tech companies, get them together on a campus. I've also been to a few campuses in Seoul, for instance, where that's beautifully done. And then these companies really inspire each other and sometimes even exchange people, because like they all of a sudden they need a few data scientists and they know that their neighbors have a great bunch of data scientists, and they can really like learn together. Like, how do I build a team like that? Can I use your team to kickstart my own data science team? You see a lot of that happening, and like companies typically in those kind of environments, they grow way quicker than other players. So that's very valuable. And also then the investor community and the corporate innovation community know where to look for those big tech talents, right? And the tech solutions. So it allows for better connection locally. So I think, yeah, there's a huge value to develop that and to make it very visible. Like, where are the hotspots in this city? Where are the hotspots in the region?
Thank you, Peter Paul. And I can add one more little insight. A few years ago, we did research in London, in the London ecosystem. And just looking at it from a cultural perspective, when I grew up, people wanted to be a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer. That was the trajectory to success. And we asked today young graduates, what do you want to be? And at least the male part of the world in our ecosystem was saying, I want to be an entrepreneur. It's like a rock star. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be the next Elon Musk. With the girls, it was number 6 or 7. It's not good enough. Should have been the same ranking as for the boys, but at least there was some cultural shift as well. So again, also this storytelling that we've done so much over here has really paid off in terms of attractiveness. Is this a career option? Can I tell this to my parents? Can I tell my parents I'm going to be an entrepreneur? Will they say you're crazy, or will they celebrate and support you? And that's also part of this communication story and the storytelling. Just to add to the conversation and insight here from London. Thank you very much, Jaigeun, Peter Paul. It was a great pleasure having you here. We are nearly on time. We got a minute left. And I just want to take this last opportunity, first of all, to thank all our participants today for joining us. Any more questions you may have that spring up after this which I found it's a very inspiring discussion, send it either to myself or Anobio Morelix, our Chief Innovation Officer. Key takeaway for us, uncommon times. We will permanently change the way in which international resources move between startup ecosystems. I really mean it. I think we are learning from not only to plug talent gaps, but we want to bring in knowledge from abroad. We want to have this exchange, this global connectedness, as we call it, and telling stories, making your ecosystem so visible is a key part of it. Keep that in mind. Let's be ahead of the curve jointly. Let's work together in order to develop this unique identity for all our members, so everybody is really visible and distinct. And as having said, if you have questions, if you want to continue the debate, connect with us here on the call or Anobio, and join our mission. And we hope to welcome you again very soon to either a TNW conference, online or physically, and certainly for the next webinar. On this note, I mentioned it in the beginning, Adam, my colleague here on the slides, his email address is here. Let us know topics you're really interested in that we should cover. On that note, again, thanks to Jaigeun, to Peter Paul, to all of you participating this morning, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me today.